Ace Frehley hadn't spoken a word all night, but when he saw the sign a little boy was holding, he stopped the music and everyone at Madison Square Garden froze. Madison Square Garden. November 1977. 20,000 people packed into the most famous arena in the world. Kiss was halfway through their set, makeup perfect, pyrotechnics firing on cue, the audience a roaring wall of devotion. Ace Frehley stood stage left in his silver Space Ace costume, his Gibson Les Paul slung across his chest. He'd been playing for 90 minutes without saying a word. That was how he operated. Gene and Paul handled the talking. Peter drummed and grinned. Ace just played. He didn't need words. His guitar said everything. The band was moving into Shock Me, Ace's signature moment, the song where he took lead vocals and reminded everyone that beneath the makeup and the smoke machines, he was a guitarist who could make that Les Paul sing in ways most players only dreamed about. The opening riff hit. Clean. Sharp. Every note exactly where it needed to be. The crowd roared. Ace stepped forward into his spotlight, fingers moving across the fretboard with that effortless precision that made other guitarists shake their heads in quiet envy. Then, 15 rows back in section 112, a little boy stood up on his seat. His father tried to pull him down. "You don't stand on seats at MSG. Security will throw you out," but the boy wouldn't budge. He was maybe 8 years old, wearing a homemade Kiss shirt that was 3 sizes too big, his face painted with a crude approximation of Ace's silver star. In his hands, raised high above his head, he held a cardboard sign. Hand-lettered in black marker. 3 words. Ace saw it mid-phrase. His fingers stopped moving. The note he was playing sustained for half a second, then died. His right hand dropped away from the strings. The guitar fell silent. 20,000 people heard it happen. That sudden absence of sound in the middle of a song. The rhythm section kept going for 2 more beats before Peter's drums faltered and stopped. Gene's bass went quiet. Paul's rhythm guitar faded out. The entire band was looking at Ace now, confused. This wasn't the arrangement. This wasn't the show. Ace Frehley didn't stop mid-song. Ever. Ace stood completely still, his Les Paul hanging against his chest, both hands at his sides now. He was looking out into the crowd at section 112. At the little boy standing on his seat. At the sign. Ace didn't defend himself. He never did. The control booth scrambled. The lighting director didn't know where to point the spots. The pyro team held their cues, waiting for musical markers that weren't coming. The sound engineer watched his meters drop to near silence, wondering if something had failed, if cables had come unplugged. In the audience, people started murmuring, pointing, trying to figure out what Ace was looking at. Camera operators swung their lenses, searching for whatever had stopped the Space Ace cold. The boy's father saw what was happening. Saw Ace Frehley staring directly at his son. He stopped trying to pull the boy down and just stood there, one hand on his son's leg to steady him, watching. The sign said, "Play for my MOM." That was all. 3 words in uneven letters, written by a child who hadn't quite mastered spacing. "Play for my MOM." Ace stared at it for 5 seconds. 10. 15. The silence in Madison Square Garden grew heavier with each passing moment. This wasn't a dramatic pause. This was something breaking. Then Ace did something he'd never done in 10 years of performing with Kiss. He reached up and unclipped his wireless pack. Handed his guitar to a tech who'd rushed on stage, confused. And he walked to the edge of the stage. The crowd noise swelled, confusion, excitement, nobody knowing what was happening. Ace ignored it. He jumped down from the stage into the security pit. Security guards moved to intercept him, then recognized who he was and stepped back. Ace Frehley walked into the audience. People scrambled to get out of his way. Others reached out to touch him, but he moved with quiet purpose, his silver costume catching the arena lights, his makeup making him look like some visiting alien cutting through the crowd. He reached section 112. Climbed over seats. Parents pulled their children back, then realized where he was going. The crowd parted. Ace stopped in front of the little boy, who was still standing on his seat, still holding the sign, his eyes wide with disbelief behind his face paint. Ace looked at the sign, then at the boy. Then he spoke for the first time all night. His voice, amplified by the arena's ambient mics, carried through the PA system. "Where's your mom?" The boy's voice was small, trembling. "She's home. She's sick. She can't come to concerts anymore." Ace nodded slowly. "What's her name?" "Linda." "Linda," Ace repeated. He looked at the sign again. Then he looked at the boy's father, who was standing there with tears already running down his face. "How sick?" Ace asked quietly. The father couldn't speak. He just shook his head. Ace understood. He reached into his costume and pulled out something small, a guitar pick. One of his signature picks. He handed it to the boy. "Give this to Linda," Ace said. "Tell her the Space Ace played for her tonight." Then he turned and walked back toward the stage. The crowd erupted, not the wild concert screaming, but something deeper, something that sounded like 20,000 people releasing breath they'd been holding. Subscribe and leave a comment, because some moments only make sense when we remember them together. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what that sign meant. What those 3 words, "Play for my MOM," carried with them. The boy's name was Michael Corso. His mother, Linda, was 34 years old. She'd been diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer 8 months earlier. The prognosis was 6 months to a year, maybe less. Linda Corso had been a Kiss fan since 1974. She'd seen them at the Beacon Theater when they were still playing clubs, before the makeup became iconic, before the pyrotechnics and the $1 million stage shows. She loved them when they were hungry and raw and playing 3 sets a night just to make rent. She loved Ace Frehley especially. Not because he was the most talented, though he was brilliant, but because he was quiet. Because he let his playing speak for him. Because he seemed like the one who was there purely for the music, not the spectacle. When Linda got sick, she told her husband Anthony and her son Michael that she had 2 regrets. One was that she wouldn't see Michael grow up. The other was that she'd never hear Ace Frehley play live one more time. Anthony had bought tickets to this show the day they went on sale. 3 tickets, him, Michael, and Linda. Front section, good seats, the kind of tickets you save for months to afford. But Linda had been hospitalized 2 weeks before the concert. She was home now, on hospice care, too weak to leave her bed. She'd cried when Anthony told her they'd have to cancel, that he'd tried to sell the tickets. "Take Michael," she'd said. "He needs to see them. He needs to remember this. It won't be the same without you. Make a sign," Linda had whispered. "Tell Ace, tell him I'm listening." So Anthony and 8-year-old Michael had come to Madison Square Garden with a cardboard sign and a prayer that somehow, in an arena of 20,000 people, Ace Frehley might see it. And he had. Away from the spotlight, Ace made a choice no one expected. Ace climbed back onto the stage. The tech handed him his Les Paul. Ace clipped the wireless pack back on. He walked to his microphone. "We're going to start that song again," he said into the mic. His voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "This time it's for Linda." He looked at Jean, at Paul, at Peter. "Follow me. I'm changing the arrangement." The band exchanged glances. "You didn't change arrangements mid-show at Madison Square Garden. You didn't go off-script when pyrotechnics were timed to the millisecond and lighting cues were programmed into computer boards." But nobody argued. Something in Ace's voice said this wasn't a suggestion. Ace counted off. 1, 2, 3, 4. "Shock Me" started again. But this time, it was different. The first time through, Ace had played it the way they always played it, tight, punchy, energetic. Rock and roll showmanship. This time, he played it slower. Cleaner. Every note given space to breathe. The tone on his Les Paul was warmer, less distorted, more naked. He wasn't playing for 20,000 people anymore. He was playing for one woman in a hospice bed in Queens, listening through a transistor radio her husband had left on the nightstand. The solo section came. Normally this was where Ace would bend strings until they screamed, where he'd run up and down the fretboard showing off the speed and technique that made him one of the era's most underrated guitarists. Tonight, he played melody. Simple, beautiful, heartbreaking melody. Notes that didn't show off. Notes that said goodbye. The arena was silent except for the music. 20,000 people barely breathing. Even the band was playing quieter, instinctively understanding that something sacred was happening. When Ace hit the final note, he let it ring. Let it sustain. Let it fade naturally instead of cutting it off with a flourish. The silence after that note was absolute. Then Madison Square Garden erupted. Not the usual concert roar. Something else. Something that sounded like grief and gratitude and recognition all mixed together. What followed silenced everyone in the room. After the show, Ace didn't go to the after-party. He didn't celebrate. He went back to the hotel, still in his makeup, and told his road manager to get him a phone. "I need an address," Ace said. "The kid from section 112. The one with the sign. Find out where he lives." The road manager made calls. Kiss had connections. Arena management had ticket records. Within an hour, they had an address in Queens. Ace called the car service. Told them to take him to that address. His manager tried to stop him. It was 2 a.m, he was still in stage makeup and costume. This was crazy. "I'm going," Ace said. That was all. The car pulled up in front of a small house in Astoria at 2:47 a.m. Lights were still on inside. Ace walked up to the door in his full Space Ace costume, silver and ridiculous in a quiet residential neighborhood, and knocked. Anthony Corso opened the door. He looked at Ace Frehley standing on his porch, and his legs nearly gave out. "Is Linda still awake?" Ace asked. Anthony couldn't speak. He just nodded and stepped aside. Ace walked into the house. Through the living room where Michael's Kiss posters covered the walls. Down the hallway to the bedroom where Linda Corso lay in a hospice bed, her husband's transistor radio on the nightstand, her face thin and pale but her eyes bright. She saw Ace Frehley walk through her bedroom door in full makeup and costume, and she started crying. Ace pulled a chair next to her bed. Sat down. Took her hand. "I heard you were listening," he said quietly. "I heard you play," Linda whispered. "I heard every note." "Good." They sat there for 20 minutes. Ace didn't try to make conversation. He didn't offer false hope or empty comfort. He just sat with her, holding her hand, two people who understood that sometimes music is the only language that matters. Before he left, Ace unhooked his guitar pick necklace. The one he wore under his costume, the one that wasn't part of the show but part of him, and placed it in Linda's hand. "This one's mine," he said. "I've used it since 1972. I want you to keep it." Linda closed her fingers around it. "Thank you." Ace stood up. Looked at Anthony, at Michael standing in the doorway in his Kiss pajamas, eyes wide. "You've got a good kid," Ace said. "He got it from his mom." Ace nodded. Then he left the way he'd come, a silver-suited alien walking back into the New York night. Linda Corso died 6 days later. She was buried holding that guitar pick. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. 20 years later, Michael Corso was backstage at a Kiss reunion show. He was 28 now, worked in music production, had gotten his own guitar and learned to play because of that night at Madison Square Garden. He found Ace in the green room between sets. Ace was older now, the makeup the same but the face beneath it lined with decades of living hard and surviving. "You won't remember me," Michael started. "Section 112, Ace said immediately. "November 77. The sign. Play for my MOM. Your mom was Linda." Michael's eyes filled with tears. "You remember?" "I remember." Michael pulled something from his pocket. A worn guitar pick on a chain. Ace's pick. The one he'd given Linda that night in her bedroom. She held this when she died, Michael said. I've carried it ever since. I wanted to give it back to you. To say thank you. Ace looked at the pick. Then at Michael. Then he closed Michael's hand around it. Keep it, Ace said quietly. It did what it was supposed to do. He turned to walk back on stage. Stopped. Looked back. Your mom heard every note, Ace said. That's all that mattered. That night Ace played Shock Me, the same way he'd played it 20 years earlier. Slow. Clean. Every note given space to breathe. Not for 20,000 people. For one.